17. Grandma B is already sitting on the bench by the field when we're dismissed. We jog over and I introduce her to my team. She says hello to everyone and that we better not waste any time because our first game is Tuesday. Cece holds up 2 fingers and circles them around the field. 2 laps. We run together and gather for stretching at the midline. While we're reaching down past our ankles to grab the grass at our cleats, Principal Measley comes and stands by the bench next to Grandma B. I crane my neck to watch him.
"I'm these girls' coach,"
he says. Grandma nods and points at me.
"And I'm that girl's grandma."
Then she looks at him and says,
"And today, I'm their supervisor." "No,"
he says,
"you're not. For a school activity, the supervisor has to be a school employee."
I straighten back up and walk to the bench. "You never told us that," I told him.
"You never asked,"
he responds. Grandma B stands up next to me and gives him a glare.
"That tone you're using is hogwash, so you can quit that right now,"
she tells him, then leans in toward me for a secret Embers Girls fist bump. Principal Measley backs up a step and says,
"I'm sorry, but those are the rules."
I'm trying to figure out how we could get everyone to my house to set up A's bounce-back net and my wobbly goal in the front yard. But we don't have enough time, and my yard's too small and it wouldn't work. Then I see Ms. Blaze walking through the parking lot, and Quinn and Fern start waving her down. She waves back and starts toward us.
"You girls are persistent,"
she says.
"Another practice day."
That makes me remember our evidence projects in class. We are persistent, and I can think of tons of examples. I introduce Ms. Blaze to Grandma B, and Principal Measley says,
"I was just explaining that school activities have to be supervised by school employees." "Got any job openings?"
Grandma B asks.
"Because I want to supervise this amazing team."
She laughs a little and looks at Principal Measley.
"You don't even have to put me on payroll."
Ms. Blaze smiles.
"I'll do it," she says. "I've always got notebooks to read and lessons to plan."
She pats the bag slung over her shoulder.
"Plus, it's an inspiring view." "Fine,"
Principal Measley says. Then he taps his clipboard against the palm of his hand a couple of times.
"I just don't want them practicing anything wrong. We got a lot accomplished yesterday, and they might think they have other ideas."
Grandma B puts her hands on her hips and says,
"I don't think you have to worry one bit about a group of kids who are organizing to practice on non-practice days."
Ms. Blaze nods her head like amen. Grandma B gives me a little smile, and I tell her she can leave if she wants, but she just says hogwash and waves me off to the field. She and Ms. Blaze sit down together on the bench, and Principal Measley goes back to the boys' field and blows his whistle for them all to gather around and get their brand new uniforms from a cardboard box that was just delivered today. I see Kenny and Morris running in together, and it takes me a second to find Bryce because he's not with them. He's jogging in from the other side of the field, and he doesn't stand with them while Measley is cutting through the tape on the box. Bryce didn't sit with them in class today either, and at first I thought that wasn't a big deal because he probably just wanted to read Smile on his iPad without them breathing 3 brain-celled comments down his neck about how boys shouldn't want to read a book about a girl. But now, they're not all 3 stuck together at practice either. He catches me looking at him as Principal Measley hands him number 10, and I give a little wave and he sends one back. Then I hold up the sign for 3 and point to my brain, and then at Kenny and Morris, who are trying to juggle their soccer balls but keep losing them off their thighs after 2 bounces. Bryce hides a laugh behind his hand. Today we practice making runs up the field, clapping our hands hard for the ball or waving and pointing to where we want the pass to go. A and I show how a defensive back could make an overlapping run up the line around her own midfielder. Then the midfielder drops back for support, A says. We run wall passes, where you send it to a teammate and she one-touches it back to you up the field, making a triangle. We practice moving diagonally toward the goal and sending it out to the wings. And we practice getting the ball to A or me or Kara in the corners because we have good feet for crosses. And Jamie and Micah and Cece are good at rushing in from the 18-yard line to finish. We practice using our support back in order to find new ways forward. Cece shows us the sign for sorry, a hard, fighting fist that realizes it's done wrong, making circles around your heart. And she shows us the sign for good and okay and again, and we practice communicating on the field. When I look up to check on Grandma B and Ms. Blaze, I see that Ms. Kravitz has joined them, and they're all watching us play. At the end, we split into 2 teams for a short-sided scrimmage, and when we take our positions, we put up our index finger bullhorns and paw our hooves in the grass, and even Grandma B does it from the bench. "Charge!" she hollers. Ms. Blaze and Ms. Kravitz laugh and throw up their horns, too. While we unlace our cleats and put on our sweatshirts, Ms. Blaze and Ms. Kravitz holler, "Great practice, girls! We'll see you next time!" and start walking toward the parking lot. Grandma B waits while Maximilian shares our stats with us. Number of passes, 102. Number of crosses, 6. Goals scored, 8. Goals saved, 4. Number of high fives, 12. When we huddle up, I tell them I think we need a team dinner this weekend. And even though Cameron's relay team was 4 kids, and my team is 13, and I haven't exactly asked my mom or Wendell, I say that we can do it at my house because I have tons of U.S. women's national team games saved that we could watch to get ready for Tuesday. Nell signs team and pretends to eat, and Maximilian writes down, this weekend. Cece nods. A says she'll organize and text everyone, pulling her phone from her bag. Then we put our hands together for our cheer, and when we sign team, our fists closing the circle. Grandma B joins the huddle and points to every single one of us, even Maximilian, and makes the sign for good. Grandma B drives Bryce and me home and comes with us inside to check on Mom. She had an appointment today and she should be resting upstairs. But when we get there, Mom and Aunt Tam are on the floor of Mom and Wendell's room, looking at the directions for the crib, with 100 pieces and screws and tools scattered around. Aunt Tam looks up. I told her to wait until Wendell got home. Grandma B laughs.
Well, that was your first mistake. But he manages a hardware store, Louise,
Aunt Tam says.
We don't need Wendell for this,
Mom says, and waves Bryce and me over.
How is practice?
We sit down between her and Aunt Tam on the carpet, and at the same time, he says fine, and I say great. Then I ask her about the team dinner, and she smiles and says,
Of course, I think that's a great idea.
She rubs a hand over her belly. Was your appointment okay? I ask.
Yup, baby's still in position, but staying put for now.
Mom hugs us around the shoulders and says,
Okay, now see if you two can find a piece labeled D, because that's supposed to go in here.
I look at the pictures on the instructions, and Bryce spots the piece labeled D, and Grandma B is gathering together the screws that hold it all together. And step by step, we figure it out and build the crib. Bryce and I each pick up an end and inch it toward the wall where Mom is pointing.
Right there,
she says. Seeing the crib up and ready for a baby makes it feel more real that we're going to have another person in our family. And soon. I've been so focused on Wendell and Cameron and Tucker and Bryce and Dodger and Roscoe and Fred that I haven't really thought about my new little sibling actually being here, in the house, with us, and if I'm excited or not, or what. I think I am excited, but I'm also kind of not because the baby will be new. and I've had a lot of new lately. But when I look around at Mom and Grandma B and Aunt Tam and Bryce and Dodger and Roscoe and the new crib, I realize I still have the old, too, all blended together with the new. And that maybe the doctor is right. This baby will have a pretty great family. Mom hugs Aunt Tam and says thanks for helping, and Grandma B bends down and talks to Mom's belly.
Hey there, grandchild. Don't you go getting ahead of yourself now, you hear?
She pats Mom's belly and says,
We'll see you when it's time.
18. I wake up thinking, what am I doing inviting my whole team here? Everyone knows my mom married Bryce's dad, but it's one thing to know we're a blended family, and another thing to walk right into our house and see all the blending. And even if I've gotten a little bit used to the traffic of Wendell and Cameron and Tucker and Bryce and Dodger and Roscoe and Fred, maybe everyone on my team will have 100 questions like, so how many brothers do you actually have? And is your mom's baby Bryce's sibling too? And what do you call each other? That last question isn't actually a bad one because I'm still working on figuring out the answer. But before I can work myself into too much of a panic, Mom pokes her head in.
Morning, B. 3.
I take a deep breath. 1. That the baby's crib will be in your room. That makes Mom laugh. 2. That I actually like reading this year. And 3. Carbo loading.
Those are great ones,
she says, and kisses the top of my head. A is the first person to get here. She walks across the street and knocks on our door, then pulls off her boots and says hi to Mom and Wendell. Cameron and Tucker are at a football game at the high school, and Bryce is up in his room with the dogs and cat, so it doesn't feel so crowded and blended, and like I need to explain everything. Micah comes in with her mom, who says hi to Mom and Wendell and thanks for hosting, and how excited she is to see everyone at our first game Tuesday. Then she gives Micah a fist bump and says, See you at 8. Cece comes with her mom, and Tess gets there a minute later with her dad. Kara and Jamie arrive together with Kara's grandma, and George's aunt drops her off. Everyone's family comes in to say hi to Mom and Wendell, and they all ask when the babies do, and say, how wonderful, and that they're looking forward to Tuesday, and that they'll be back at 8 o'clock. I'm waiting for Maximilian to get here, because I know he's worried about showing up at Bryce Valentine's house. That's why he hasn't visited. I'm sure of it. It's enough to be stuck in his class and laughed at since 2nd grade. But when he does get here, he doesn't knock. He just walks right through the door like he's been here 100 times, and I'm so happy I touch him on the outsides of his shoulders and say, Thanks for coming. His grandma pokes her head in and says,
So proud of you, B. Go team!
When everyone's arrived, Wendell heads out to pick up the pizzas, and we fill the living room to watch some soccer. We squish 6 of us on the couch, 2 in the chair from the Valentine's house, and the rest on the floor. But we only stay seated for one half because we're watching the World Cup game from 2019 when the U.S. was playing Thailand, and in the second half they scored 10 goals. 4 of those goals were scored in a 6-minute span of time. We know that because Maximilian announces it. Incredible! He cheers, and we're all standing up and moving around the living room like we're right on the field with them. A also tells us there are 6 starters on the field who are making their World Cup debut. That means they were playing in their first World Cup ever, and that we should treat Tuesday like our World Cup debut. Wendell comes home with the pizzas, and we line up in the kitchen to put hot slices on our plates. Then we bring them back in the living room, and I switch to the World Cup final game against the Netherlands. It's hard to sit for that game, too. Especially the first hour, when there's no score and the Netherlands keeper is saving everything. We watch the passes and the runs and the way they communicate, and when they move the ball up the field, shoot, and the keeper makes a save, we all jump up and go, "Oh!" Bryce comes downstairs to feed Dodger and Roscoe and peeks into the living room. I can tell Maximilian sees him because he shifts his feet and stops cheering. A few of the girls notice him looking in too, and I'm thinking Maximilian is going to shrink and duck out of view before Bryce can say something mean like, "Why's a boy at the girls' team dinner?" or something, because that's what Kenny and Morris would do. But instead, Maximilian looks right at Bryce and says, "Want to watch?" Bryce scoffs and says, "I know how it ends." Maximilian just shrugs. "Suit yourself." Then he takes a sip of soda and adds, "I know how the Chronicles of Narnia movies end too, but I still rewatch them all the time because—" He pauses and looks up at the ceiling like he's trying to find the answer up there. "Well, because they're badass, that's why." That makes the whole team erupt, Bryce too, because Maximilian doesn't say words like badass. "And so is the U.S. Women's National Team," he continues. Cece wants to know why everyone is laughing, and no one can figure out how to sign it, so I point to Maximilian and do the sign for H-A-H-A with my 2 fingers flapping in and out from my fist like they're hysterical. Cece laughs, but it doesn't feel right having her miss what was so funny, and it makes me want to learn more signs so I can speak her language. Cece points to Bryce and then gestures for him to come in. Bryce shrugs his shoulders like, "Why not?" and takes a seat on the floor. The dogs follow him in, and half the team gets closer so they can pet them. We get to the point of the game where Megan Rapinoe scores on a penalty kick, and we all explode. And then again 8 minutes later, when Rose Lavelle carries the ball from midfield, fakes to the right, and strikes with her left, sinking the ball into the lower right corner of the goal. Even Bryce jumps to his feet, the dogs circling around him and yipping. By the end of the game, we're all making our index finger bullhorns and pawing the living room floor with our feet. Bryce looks at us and laughs, but it's not a laugh at you kind of laugh. It's a "you all are so ridiculous but good ridiculous" kind of laugh. After the game, we start talking about what we want to wear for Team Spirit on Tuesday. It's a school tradition that you dress up on game day. Tess thinks we should dress up in nice clothes, like skirts and blouses. And Emmy and Georgia think we should do something wacky, like tie-dye our soccer socks and wear them to school pulled up over our pants. But then Jamie says, "When are we going to have time to tie-dye?" "Pajamas?" Fern suggests. Maximilian asks Bryce what the boys are doing for Team Spirit for their game on Monday. I don't know yet." Then he says bye quick and kind of gets weird and grabs a slice of cold pizza and heads back up to his room. Everyone looks at me like, what the heck was that? And I shrug, because how am I supposed to know? Maximilian passes a note to Cece explaining Team Spirit. She reads it, then uses her finger to pretend she's painting her face. "Yeah," Quinn says. "I have face paints. I can bring them Tuesday and we can meet early outside school." Nell says she has face paints too and can bring them on the bus for those who can't get an early ride. We decide on a left cheek soccer ball and say it's a plan and put our hands in together for a cheer. Tess's dad is the first one to get here, and then Nell's mom and George's aunt. Emmy introduces us to her mom's boyfriend, and I didn't know that Emmy's family was kind of blended too. Maximilian's grandma squeezes into the mudroom, and everyone's spilling into the kitchen and chatting and sticking around for a few minutes. They all start talking about Principal Measley and how they're not so sure about him, and they're wondering if he's gotten any more encouraging, and if we want them to call the school. We all agree that we wouldn't have any evidence to prove he's encouraging, but that we've got this, and the supervised practices on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are the best. Then they all look around at each other, and my mom is pulling out a paper, and they start passing around a sign-up list to supervise. "It's okay," I announce. "Principal Measley said it has to be a school employee, so Ms. Blaze and Ms. Kravitz agreed to do it." But it doesn't stop them all from smiling and cheering and signing up anyway.
We want to be there,
George's aunt says, writing her name down.
This is something exciting.
And that makes my heart beat fast. Team, 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 team. Then Cece's mom, dad, and little brother knock and come in, and we all make room and say hello. And Cece points to them and makes both her hands into F's. Then she brings her hands around together, meeting to close the circle, just like the sign for team. Family.